My mother-in-law called me the best thing that ever happened to their family. She said it at our wedding, in front of 200 guests, and I believed her. Right up until the morning, she sat across from me in a mediator's office, fully composed, and told my attorney that I was an emotionally unstable mother who worked too many hours to raise a child properly. I'm Paige. I'm 32 years old. I'm a senior project manager at one of the largest commercial real estate development firms in the greater Nashville area, and for the past 4 years of my life, I funded an entire family's lifestyle while my husband funded someone else's. That morning in the mediator's office, my husband, Landon, sat beside his mother like a teenager who'd been dragged to the principal's office and still couldn't figure out what he'd done wrong. He was 41, handsome in a way that had once made me feel lucky, with the kind of effortless confidence that only comes from never having to pay for anything yourself. He was wearing a sport coat I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. I recognized it the moment I walked in. The agreement his family's attorney had prepared was 32 pages long. I read every word before I came. The highlights. Landon would retain primary physical custody of our daughter, Isla, on the grounds that my career required extensive travel and irregular hours. I would contribute $2,800 a month toward after-school care and general living expenses. No mention of child support going the other direction. No mention of the money I had been pouring into his family for 4 years. No mention of Landon's girlfriend, who was currently 7 weeks pregnant. I set the documents down, smoothed the edge of the page with my thumb, and said, "I won't be signing this." The room went very quiet. Landon's attorney looked up. My mother-in-law pressed her lips together. Landon himself let out a short, impatient exhale, like I had just announced I wanted to stop for gas on a road trip. And I thought, 4 years. 4 years I was patient. 4 years I said yes, not anymore. When Landon and I started dating, he was running what he called a boutique craft coffee roasting operation out of a warehouse space in East Nashville. He had 3 employees, a logo he had paid too much for, and a business plan written on the back of a cocktail napkin. What he did not have was any real revenue, but he had the pitch. God, he had the pitch. He told me on our 3rd date that he was one good distribution deal away from making it real. He said it the way certain men say everything, like the outcome was already decided, and the universe simply had not caught up yet. I was 28, just promoted to project manager, and I mistook confidence for competence. It took me longer than I would like to admit to figure out those are not the same thing. We got married 18 months later at a venue outside Franklin. His mother cried. His father gave us toast about what a fine young woman I was, and how Landon had finally made a smart decision. Looking back, that framing should have told me everything. The first time he asked to borrow money was 5 weeks after the honeymoon, $8,000 to cover a shortfall in the roasting operation. He looked genuinely embarrassed asking, which it made it easier to say yes. I wired it that same night. That $8,000 became 20. 20 became 70. By our 2nd anniversary, I had loaned Landon's business a total of just over $140,000, documented in a series of text messages, where he thanked me and promised to pay it back as soon as things stabilized. Things never stabilized. What happened instead was the business failed quietly and completely. The equipment was sold at a loss, and Landon pivoted, with my money, into a food truck venture with his college roommate. That lasted 14 months before the trucks needed repairs he could not afford. I covered 2 of those repairs. I told myself it was an investment. Meanwhile, his parents needed help. My father-in-law had co-signed a loan for a property that went underwater. My mother-in-law's medical bills from a minor procedure ballooned because they had let their supplemental insurance lapse. Landon's younger sister needed money for a security deposit on an apartment. Each time it came to me, each time someone said, "You are so generous, Paige. We are so lucky to have you." And each time I accepted that instead of a check, instead of a timeline, Instead of any acknowledgement that this was not generosity, it was expectation. When I got pregnant with Isla, I thought something might shift. I hoped a baby would make Landon grow up, make his family treat me like a partner instead of a resource. What I got instead was a mother-in-law who insisted on being in the delivery room, which I said no to, and who spent the first 6 months of Isla's life telling me I was breastfeeding wrong, sleeping wrong, going back to work too soon. I went back to work at 10 weeks because we needed my income. There was no alternative. Landon was exploring new opportunities, which is what he called the 18 months he spent making calls from the kitchen table while I handled every night feeding, every pediatrician appointment, every school application. Isla was 2.5 when I noticed the first thing that did not add up. It was a charge on our joint credit card. Not large, $67 at a restaurant I did not recognize in Midtown. I might have ignored it if there had not been 3 more over the following 2 weeks. Different places, all in the same part of the city, all on weekday afternoons when Landon had told me he was meeting with investors. I did not confront him right away. That is the part people never understand when I tell this story. They assume betrayal makes you explosive. It does not always. Sometimes it makes you very still and very quiet and very focused. I worked in project management. I knew how to gather data before drawing conclusions. Over the next 6 weeks, I watched. I paid attention to his phone, to his schedule, to the small inconsistencies that accumulate when someone is running a second life. He started showering the moment he walked in the door. He took calls outside on the back deck, always after checking that I was upstairs. He stopped coming to bed at the same time I did. He forgot, twice, to pick up Isla from her after-school program, something he had never done before. Then I got the notification. I had set up a shared calendar with Landon early in our marriage, mostly for coordinating Isla's schedule. He had stopped updating it years ago, but the connection was still live. On a Tuesday morning in October, a calendar event synced to my phone from his account. The title was just initials and a clinic name. The attached note said, "First OB appointment, confirm parking." I stood in the parking garage at my office and read that notification 4 times. He was not just cheating. He was about to become a father with someone else. I did not call him. I did not go home and confront him. I took the elevator to my office, sat down at my desk, and opened a spreadsheet. If there is one skill that has served me more than any other in my life, it is my ability to document things. I have kept financial records the way some people keep journals, detailed, organized, dated. It is a habit from my early career, and it saved me in ways I could not have anticipated when I started. Over the next 3 days, I compiled every dollar I had transferred to Landon, to his businesses, to his family, going back to month 1 of our marriage. Every text message where he acknowledged a loan, every email where I had paid a bill on behalf of someone in that household, every bank wire, every check with his name on the memo line. The total came to $312,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $312,000. Enough for a down payment on another property, enough to fund the graduate degree I had put off for 4 years, enough to have made entirely different choices, and it had gone into a family that had never once asked me what I needed. That same week, I called a family law attorney. Her name was Ms. Harrington, a woman my colleague had used during her own divorce 2 years before and described as the calmest person you will ever watch dismantle someone's argument. We met on a Thursday evening in her office in Green Hills. I brought the spreadsheet. She looked through it for several minutes before she said anything. "Paige," she said, "a significant portion of what you've documented here qualifies as recoverable debt, not a gift. Debt. You have the acknowledgments in writing." I exhaled slowly, and Isla, "Tell me about your caregiving history." I told her everything. Every school pickup, every sick day I had taken off work, every permission slip, every dentist appointment. Every night I had stayed up late finishing a report after Isla was asleep, so I could be present during the hours she was awake. I told her about the 2 times Landon had forgotten to pick her up. I told her about the weekend he had left Isla with his mother without telling me, because he had plans. Miss Harrington nodded. Primary caregiver is clearly established. The income disparity also works in your favor. You are the financially stable parent. She looked up. What about the other woman? I told her about the calendar notification. She did not blink. Do you know who she is? Not yet, I said. That changed 4 days later when Kayla texted me herself. I did not know her name until I saw it light up on my phone. Hi, my name is Kayla. I think we need to talk. I had no idea how she had gotten my number. Later, she told me she had found it through a contact form on our neighborhood association website, where Landon had listed me as the primary homeowner. We met at a coffee shop in Brentwood on a Saturday morning while Isla was at my sister's. Kayla was 23, a nursing student with tired eyes and a paper cup she'd held in both hands like it was keeping her warm. She looked less like a homewrecker and more like someone who had not slept properly in weeks. She told me Landon had said we had been separated for over a year, that we were only living together for our daughter's sake. That he was working on the paperwork. I looked at her across the table. We've never been separated, I said, not for a single day. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she said, I figured it out 3 weeks ago. I found a photo on his phone. You were at a wedding together, and I could see the date. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm 11 weeks pregnant. The familiar cold settled into my chest. Not rage, something colder than rage, clarity. I didn't come here to apologize, she said, because I know that doesn't fix anything. I came because I overheard a phone call he made to his mom last week. She paused. He told her that once the divorce was settled, he'd figure out what to do about the baby, that he'd offer me a monthly payment to stay quiet. His mom called me a complication. I set down my coffee. He's been lying to both of us, she said. I needed you to know that, and I need to figure out what to do. I don't have family here. I have a semester left of school. I can't do this alone, and he just stopped returning my calls. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked her one question. Do you have any documentation? Text messages, voicemails, anything he sent you related to money or the pregnancy? She pulled out her phone. What Kayla showed me was more than I had bargained for. Landon had been paying rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in Germantown, $1,400 a month, for the past 8 months. He had logged those payments in his business account as consulting fees. He had also covered her prenatal blood work and billed it as client entertainment. The accountant who handled his books, a careful, methodical man named Mr. Fowler, who had worked with our household for 3 years, had been flagging the discrepancies and getting no response. I called Mr. Fowler that evening. He picked up on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. He told me he had been asking Landon about the irregular charges for months. Landon had told him I was aware of everything, that the apartment was a short-term rental investment. Mr. Fowler had his doubts, but had not pushed. Now he was willing to put everything in writing. I kept every record, he said. I wasn't comfortable with any of it. I thanked him. I asked if he would be willing to cooperate if the case went further. He said yes, without hesitation. That night, I forwarded everything to Miss Harrington. She called me back within the hour. This has crossed into potential fraud, she said. Using business accounts to fund a personal affair, misrepresenting expenses. That is not just a family law issue. Are you prepared for this to get more complicated? I thought about Isla asleep in the next room. I thought about 4 years of silence and patience and telling myself it would get better. I'm prepared, I said. 3 days after I sent the formal demand letter. 30 days notice, $312,000 in documented debt. Custody petition filed. My mother-in-law called to invite me to Sunday dinner. She used the same tone she always used when she wanted something: warm, measured, almost motherly. "Just a family conversation, Paige. Let us do this the civilized way." I went, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to see how they planned to play it. The table had everyone. My father-in-law at the head, my mother-in-law across from my sister-in-law, and Landon himself at the far end, arms crossed, looking like a man who had been briefed. There was food on the table that no one touched. My mother-in-law opened with concern. "We just want what's best for Isla. She needs stability, Paige. This household can provide that. You work such long hours." "Who has been paying for Isla's school?" I asked. She stopped. "Who handles her doctor's appointments? Who packed her lunch every day this week? Who knows she's allergic to tree nuts, that she can't sleep without her sound machine, that she still carries around the stuffed rabbit she named after a character in a book I read to her when she was 3? I looked around the table. Can anyone at this table answer a single one of those questions? No one did. I reached into my bag and set the folder on the table. I'm happy to discuss stability. But let us start with the financial picture. Landon stood up. "Paige, this is not the time." "It's exactly the time." I opened the folder. $312,000, Landon. Documented. Acknowledged in writing, and while you were asking me to help cover your family's loan gap, you were paying rent on an apartment for a 23-year-old nursing student. My sister-in-law inhaled sharply. My mother-in-law's face went pale in a way that makeup could not cover. "She's pregnant," I said, because there was no reason not to. "And according to her, your family already discussed offering her a monthly check to disappear." My mother-in-law's voice, when it came, was almost a whisper. "You have no right." "I have every right." I closed the folder. "I am filing for sole custody of Isla. I am pursuing the debt legally, and I will not be contributing another dollar to this household. Not for school, not for insurance, not for anything." Landon moved around the table toward me, his voice dropping low. "You are going to destroy my family." I looked up at him steadily. "You started that yourself." The retaliation came on a Wednesday. I was in a client meeting when my phone lit up with a number from Isla's school. I excused myself before the second ring. The school secretary's voice was careful, controlled in the way voices get when someone is trying not to cause panic. She told me that at noon, during lunch recess, a woman had arrived at the front office claiming to be Isla's grandmother, and that there was a family emergency. The school, in a lapse of protocol they have since apologized for extensively, had allowed Isla to leave. I drove to my in-laws' house in 11 minutes. I know because I checked the call log later and it does not lie. Isla was in the living room, sitting on the floor with her tablet, eating grapes, completely unaware that anything was wrong. My mother-in-law was at the kitchen counter, arranging something in a vase, as if this were a perfectly ordinary afternoon. "What did you do?" I said. It was not a question. She wanted to see her grandmother, calm, infuriatingly calm. "She is 6 years old. She was taken from school without my consent." I walked past her directly to Isla. "Sweetheart, we're going home." Isla looked up. "Grandma said you were busy today." Something inside me went very still. "Grandma was wrong," I said quietly. "Mommy is never too busy for you." I took Isla's hand. My mother-in-law started talking behind me, about rights, about family, about what the court would decide. I took out my phone, turned on the video function, and held it up. "I am documenting that I am removing my daughter from this property. If anyone attempts to stop me, I will treat it as unlawful detention of a minor." The room went silent. I walked out. That night, I called Miss Harrington and sent her the video. The next morning, we filed for an emergency protective order limiting my in-laws' unsupervised contact with Isla. Miss Harrington called it a gift. "They handed us exactly what we needed," she said. The preliminary hearing was on a gray Thursday morning in February. I wore a dark blazer and flat shoes. Nothing that said I was trying too hard, nothing that said I was falling apart. Both would have been wrong. Landon's side went first. His attorney painted me as a driven professional, not in a flattering way, who had prioritized her career over her family. He used the word absent twice. He noted that the paternal household had multiple adults available for childcare, a stable home environment, and deep roots in the community. My mother-in-law testified. She was very good at it. Soft voice. Careful pauses. She said she loved her granddaughter more than anything, that she had always supported me as a daughter-in-law, that this situation was heartbreaking for everyone. Then Mr. Fowler was called. He had worked as the family's accountant for 3 years before Landon stopped paying him and he moved his practice elsewhere. He testified calmly and without embellishment. He confirmed he had flagged suspicious expense entries for months. He confirmed that Landon had told him I was aware of the apartment situation. He confirmed that the payments categorized as consulting fees and client entertainment were consistent in timing and amount with what Kayla had provided in her own documentation. Landon's attorney suggested Mr. Fowler was motivated by his own unpaid invoices. Mr. Fowler said quietly, "I do have unpaid invoices, that's a separate matter. Everything I've testified to today is what I documented at the time. Those two things don't cancel each other out." I saw the judge write something down. When I testified, I kept it simple. I did not perform grief. I did not ask for sympathy. I listed facts: the caregiving record, the financial record, the school incident on video, the documented loans with written acknowledgments. I said, I have never tried to remove Isla from her father's life. I have tried to remove her from an environment where she is used as leverage. Those are different things. The hearing ended without a ruling that day, but as I walked out of the courthouse, I could feel that something had shifted. 2 weeks later, the situation unraveled in a way no one had planned. Kayla sent me a text late on a Friday night. Something happened at the doctor. Landon was there. I think you should know. She called me 20 minutes later. At the genetics consultation that afternoon, questions about the conception timeline had come up, routine questions, medical history. The dates had been reviewed, and Kayla, through tears, told me that when she had started seeing Landon, she had still briefly been in contact with her ex-boyfriend. The overlap was small, but it existed. He exploded, she said, right there in the office. He called me a liar. He called his mom on the way to the car. By the time I got home, she had already texted me that I had 48 hours to get out of the apartment. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, absorbing this. "Kayla," I said finally, "where are you right now?" "A parking lot." "Go to a hotel tonight. I'll send you the address of one near Miss Harrington's office. We'll meet in the morning." The next day, Miss Harrington listened to everything and then sat back in her chair with the particular stillness of a person doing very complicated math. Their entire strategy for the custody case was built around painting Landon as a man ready to be a responsible father with a growing family, she said. That narrative just collapsed. She paused. "We don't have to do anything with this. The truth has its own momentum." She was right. By Monday, the story had moved through Landon's professional circles the way those things move. Not announced, just known. Business associates who had been considering a joint venture with him went quiet. An investor introduction his father had been cultivating for months evaporated, and the lenders who held Landon's outstanding, sensing instability, accelerated their collection timeline. I had not started any of those conversations. I had not needed to. The final custody ruling came on a Tuesday morning in March. Sole legal and physical custody to me. Landon received scheduled visitation under specific conditions and was ordered to pay child support. Modest, given his financial state, but legally binding and official. The debt settlement came 6 weeks later. Faced with the full documentation and Miss Harrington's team, Landon's family agreed to a structured repayment plan that required liquidating 2 assets: a rental property my father-in-law had held for a decade, and a stock portfolio he had been guarding like a trophy. It was not the full amount, but it was enough to matter, and the paper was signed. The house went on the market in May. The grand one, with the long driveway and the landscaping my mother-in-law was always having refreshed. The one where I had spent 4 years trying to belong to people who had already decided my value was purely financial. I drove past it once, not on purpose. I saw the sign and pulled over. I sat there looking at it for a while. I thought about the first time I had walked through that front door, the hostess gift I had brought, the way I had tried to memorize which fork to use and which opinions to soften, and how much of myself to make smaller, so they would think I fit. I thought about how long I had kept doing that, and how gradually and completely it had become just the shape of my life. I did not feel vindicated, sitting there. I felt tired, and then, slowly, something else, a lightness I had almost forgotten the feeling of. The last time I saw my mother-in-law, she came to my apartment on a Sunday afternoon in June, unannounced. She was alone. No car I recognized parked outside. No designer bag. Just a woman standing at my front gate in a cotton blouse, looking older than I remembered and smaller somehow, like something that had previously been held up by the architecture of a life that no longer existed. I came outside. I did not invite her in. She sat on the small bench I keep near the door and looked at the potted herbs Isla and I had planted along the railing: rosemary, basil, a tomato plant that had outgrown its container and needed to be moved to a bigger one. She did not speak for a long time. "Landon's not doing well," she said finally. I waited. "He's not working. He's struggling." She smoothed her hands across her knees. "I thought maybe if you talked to him." "I won't be doing that." She looked at me. Her eyes were red in a way that was not performance. "I know I have no right to ask." "You don't," I said. Silence settled between us. A car passed on the street. Somewhere upstairs, Isla was watching something. I could hear the faint music of it through the open window. "I always thought I was protecting him," my mother-in-law said, almost to herself. "Giving him what he needed, smoothing things over, keeping the problems from ever reaching him. I thought that was what a mother did." She stopped. "I think I just made him someone who never had to face anything, and then, when things fell apart, he didn't know how." I looked at her for a long moment. "That is probably the most honest thing you have ever said to me." She did not argue with that. She just sat there, looking at the herbs, her hands folded in her lap. After a while she rose. At the gate she turned back. "He does ask about Isla. He can see her on the schedule the court set. That hasn't changed." She nodded once and walked away. I stood there until she reached the end of the block. Then Isla appeared at the door behind me in her rain boots, even though it was not raining. She was wearing them because she liked how they sounded on the stairs. "Mommy, can we water the tomatoes?" I turned around and felt something settle in my chest. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a window finally being closed against a draft that had been there so long you had stopped noticing it. "Yeah, baby," I said. "Let's go water the tomatoes." We went around the side of the building to the small raised bed we had built out of cedar planks the month before. Isla held the watering can in both hands and poured with great concentration, her tongue between her teeth, the way it gets when she is focused. The tomatoes were still green and small. She already had plans for what she would do when they turned red. "Mommy," she said, not looking up, "do you think we could get a dog?" I laughed, for the first time all day, a real one, maybe someday. "A small one. We'll see." She glanced up at me, squinting a little in the afternoon light. "I like it here," she said. "It feels like ours." I crouched beside her and steadied the bottom of the watering can. "It is ours," I said, "completely ours." She smiled and went back to her tomatoes. "Nobody tells you that about starting over. You expect it to feel like loss, and for a long time, it does. The grief is real, and the exhaustion is real, and there are nights when you lie awake running through every moment you said yes when you should have said no, and wondering what your life would look like if you had trusted yourself sooner. But then one afternoon your daughter says it feels like hours, and something you had not even realized you were still carrying just lets go. I never stopped being a mother. I stopped pretending that being a good one meant making us myself invisible. That is a different thing entirely, and it took me 4 years and $312,000 and one very quiet Sunday with my daughter and a watering can to finally understand the difference.